subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Namaste, konnichiwa. Welcome to the thenupurtewarishow. Let's talk business. And today we are joined by renowned economist, Mr. P.K.Basu. Mr. P.K.Basu, welcome to the thenupurtewarishow. Let's talk business.
Lovely to be here. I look forward to discussing the links between Japan and India. It's wonderful that you have this unique show that links Japan to India because we have such a lot of history in common. Japan, I think, is a tremendous model for the rest of Asia to emulate. And that's one. The second is the fact that we in India are eternally grateful to Japan for the support given to our leader, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, during our independence movement. And I think that played a crucial role in freeing India from colonial rule. And so there is a lot that we have in common. And it's wonderful to have this show.
Thank you. Indeed. Indeed. Actually, Japan and India, we are very much connected since the ancient time. And not only through Buddhism, before that also, you'll find a lot of god and goddesses in different parts of Japan, which says actually that we are not through Buddhism, but before Buddhism, the India came to Japan. So, and there are a lot of, even though in Japanese language also, you'll find a lot of Sanskrit words, a lot of things, a lot of connections. And as you said, that Japan really helped us, the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, that's why we are definitely grateful for that. So can we apply the same model, Japanese model, to India?
Well, I think there are many things that we can learn from Japan. The most important is that there are stages of economic development. And the first thing that needs to happen when you are a poor country, you need to be able to employ millions and millions of people. And the best way to do that is to begin with labor-intensive manufacturing, which is what Japan began to do in the early part of the 20th century, after it had succeeded with the Meiji Restoration. And during that period, Japan also educated its people and ensured that you had universal literacy. Everybody was literate and able to read and write. And then it began to focus on labor-intensive manufacturing, employing millions of people in textiles, garments, etc., shoes, those sorts of products, which employed many millions of people. And during the First World War, Japan became the clothier to the world. It began to produce silk and other textiles, and the rest of the world began to buy them. And that employed millions. And then in the 1930s, and then again in the 1950s, Japan focused much more on things like steel, cars, shipbuilding, etc., which are more heavy industry. Now, by the late 1950s, Japan had completed full employment because it had employed millions of people in labor-intensive manufacturing. So then it wanted to go into the more resource-intensive things like steel and cars. And the old labor-intensive manufacturing companies looked for opportunities elsewhere. That pattern is known as the flying geese model. You had the leading goose, or Japan, in the lead. The next cohort was primarily South Korea and Taiwan, which were former colonies of Japan. And that is where the labor-intensive manufacturers moved their manufacturing once Japan was moving to the next stage of industry. And so Korea, Taiwan, and then to some degree, Singapore, Hong Kong also participated in the next phase. And over time, they too achieved full employment because they began with labor-intensive manufacturing, achieved full employment, and then the next cohort began to emerge, which was the countries of ASEAN, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and to some degree the Philippines. They were the next phase. Now, to some degree, India has missed this enormous opportunity of being part of the flying
Its
geese pattern of
development.
development. Yes. And the part that has been missing in India is labor-intensive manufacturing. So India still has millions of people who need to be employed in modern industry, move people away from basic agricultural work, reforms to its labor market last year. These reforms essentially make it much easier for people to hire and also to let go of workers. And to basically, the main way they can do that is India has now introduced a system of contract labor in terms of a period of time that you can be contracted for. You do the work, you create a new industry, and then once the contract ends, there's no need to lay you off. You just move on to some other job. So this contract labor system.
I have a question actually. Since we're taking the Japanese model, Japan after Second World War, Japan was not Japan before Second World War. It was a very shock for them. They never expected to be defeated. It was really very different, the mindset after Second World War. So before Second World War, definitely what they did, it was different kind of boom, industrial boom. And after Second World War, even psychologically also they had to go through a lot of trauma. And that changed their policy, and it affected the way they spread their industrialization. So here, yes, please.
Yeah, well, I think the main difference between the period before the Second World War in the 1930s, there was a very similar pattern in the sense that in the 1930s, Japan focused on steel, heavy industry, but also on armaments production. Armaments production, of course, was a very big part of the story in the 1930s. But interestingly, the countries that had been colonized by Japan, like Manchuria in the northeast of China, the first Nissan manufacturing plant was actually established in Jilin province, in a place called Changchun, in the capital of Jilin province in China. Not in Japan, but in China. So you actually had similar patterns emerging already. Labor-intensive manufacturing was to some degree already moving away from Japan to Korea and Taiwan. But at that time, Korea and Taiwan were primarily agricultural bases for Japan. And then once the Second World War ended and Japan had surrendered, Japan had to restart because after the war, there were as many as 12 million people who were unemployed in Japan. And they had been working in the armaments industry, in places like Japan, Korea, in mines and other things, and they all came back. So you had 12 million surplus workers in Japan who needed to be employed. And that is why they adopted the labor-intensive manufacturing approach to absorb the workers. So instead of sending them to work in the farms where there would be surplus labor, they were absorbed into industry, into basic labor-intensive industry that would give them the first stage of jobs. And as they learned industrial ways and so on, they were then able to transition to steel, cars. Now, of course, Japan had the experience of steel and cars from the 1930s. They had engineers, they had technicians who were able to use the experience that they had from the 1930s, apply it in the 1950s, and that, of course, helped them. Now, if you look at India's case, interestingly, India is the world's second largest producer of steel, aluminium, cement already. So interestingly, the second phase has already happened, but the first phase has not. India is also the fifth largest producer of cars in the world. So to some degree, interestingly, India has done the second phase of industrialization, but it has missed the first phase. And by not focusing enough on labor-intensive manufacturing, it has missed one very important feature of the industrialization process, which is the ability to employ millions and millions of people, absorb them, from basic agricultural work or other types of rural services, and absorb them into producing things like clothes, garments, textiles. Throughout the history of India, if you think back through most of history before the colonial period, India was famous as the clothier of the world. It used to produce clothes for the whole world. And that has only ended really in the last 70 to 100 years. India is no longer the clothier of the world, but it can easily become again. And I think that is the missing element. And for that, India needs the labor market reforms. The labor market reforms that were undertaken last year, I think now create the basis for India to actually have a boom in labor-intensive manufacturing, in things like textiles, garments, shoes, toys, and processed food. Now, these are all industries that will absorb a lot of people and will enable millions of jobs to be created. And as that happens, you'll get a really powerful boom in employment, and that will enable India to begin to look a little bit more like Japan in the 1960s, a rapidly progressing economy that was the envy of the world.
Wonderful.
Now, that is one side.
So I have one more question actually here.
Yeah.
So Japan, what helped even before Second World War, after Second World War, it was nationalism. Actually, being Japanese, it is a pride. Even still, you will find there, though it is not that much visible, but inside I have experienced a lot. Being in different parts of Japan, that being Japanese, those who are in their 70s, who are in their 80s, it's a really pride, and it's a good thing. You should love your country. It's a very good thing. So that, do you think, and that helped Japan to make what Japan is today? Do you think that we have in India?
Well, you see, what we lack in India is a real pride in being Indian, in our Indian heritage. And that, unfortunately, is one of the consequences of colonialism. We have 200 years of slavery to the British. We have about 500 or 600 years of slavery to the Turks and others. And so India, to some degree, is a more divided society. And what is now required is for us to develop a genuine pride in our enormous heritage. If you look back to history, during the Gupta period, Indians knew gravity. Brahmagupta and Varaha Mihira and Aryabhatta were tremendous scientists. So there is a tremendous heritage in our history that we need to take pride in. Not false pride, just the fact that it was there means that we as a nation do have the capability of emerging again. And I think the spirit of national purpose and national identity that Japan has is tremendous. Now you see a genuine, complete faith in the nation, and that brings a degree of discipline that is unique. And that's actually very similar in South Korea. I mean, what is interesting about South Korea is that, during the Asian financial crisis, I saw the spirit of Korea really come together, and they were bound together. So for India, the current challenge of COVID presents a tremendous challenge for us. And I think it is exposing some of the weaknesses in our system, but also I think it is bringing Indians together, and there is, among the majority of Indians, a sense of working together in a united way to deal with this challenge and all the other challenges to come. So I think learning from Japan and collaborating with Japan, I think is going to be very important in the next phase. We are now part of the Quad, but Japan and India have so much of history in common. Saraswati is, there's is worshipped in Japan, Vinjaiten. And there is so much else. I mean, if you think about the word Zen, Zen is actually Dhyan. Dhyan in Bengali or Dhyan became Chen in China and became Zen in Japan. So when I go to a beautiful temple like the Kiyomizu temple in Kyoto, I feel a tremendous tranquility. And there is a, the fact that the Japan has not been colonized, it has been able to keep a sense of national unity for more than 1,000 years, gives it enormous strengths that we can learn from. And the fact that Japan is so interested in investing in the development of infrastructure in India, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor is essentially a joint project between India and Japan to develop that industrial corridor. I think there is tremendous scope for cooperation and a tremendous scope for emulation as well. And of course, in the past century, Radha Binod Pal is another symbol of how an Indian restored pride in Japan, in Japan's national identity, by ensuring that during the war crimes trials, a fairer approach was taken by just one judge, Radha Binod Pal from India. So we have a lot that Japan and India can build upon. And I think,
of course, you are very much right. Definitely. We can do a lot of things. Like I always say that Indian spirituality and Japanese, productivity, if we can combine together, it can be really the biggest and explosive bomb. And, we will become so much productive that, we can conquer the world. Definitely together, I'm talking about conquering means the positive way, doing better things for the world, giving back to the world. So, but here also, I've been here for 18 years. I would like to say that even the today COVID situation, it is uniting India. Definitely. We are just for each other, and it is uniting India indeed. But again, for being Japanese, Japan is a small country. Japan, it doesn't mean Japan has less population. For a small country, it has population actually. And the way they're disciplined, the organized skill and honesty and quality, these things they maintain, still they're maintaining actually. So I think these things we have to learn a lot from Japan.
Yes. I mean, I think the moral basis, the fact that modern Japan is based on the legacy of 1,000 years of their history, of a tremendous sense of unity and discipline, and a moral basis. There is far less corruption in Japan than in most of the world. There is cleanliness. There's a deep commitment to cleanliness. That I think the rest of the world can marvel at and learn from. And we in India, the Swachh Bharat program is an attempt to begin the journey that Japan achieves seamlessly. So I think that Japanese civilization has tremendous lessons for the rest of Asia. And I would really look forward to India learning more and more from the Japanese example, because culturally we have so much in common. Those cultural commonalities can, I think, help to deepen bonds and also help India to learn lessons from Japan and use them to succeed.
Thank you so much, actually. Thank you so much. So everyone, all the viewers, definitely you heard what P.K.Basu, Mr. P.K.Basu, our renowned economist said, and definitely you'd love to know what do you think? Can we become Japan, and what we have to take from Japan, or what we can give to Japan? So those things, if you have more questions, if you have really questions on this subject, definitely do write to us. Definitely we will again talk to Mr. P.K.Basu. He would love to come, I'm sure, without asking him. I'm just commenting, but I'm sure that he will be with us, and he will He would love to answer your questions. And so today we would like to say bye here. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Basu, for joining. And for the viewers, definitely.
Arigatou gozaimashita.
Arigatou gozaimashita. For the viewers, I would like to say that tomorrow I'll be with you with the thenupurtewarishow. So today, do take care of yourself and do love yourself too. Mr. Basu, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Subratri, good night. Oyasu nasai.
Good night.
Arigatou gozaimashita.
Arigatou gozaimashita.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.